Greetings, lore masters. Tonight our chronicle covers the icy, stone-cold corridors of Castle Volkihar and the ancient vampire clan that calls it home. We're delving into the mind of Lord Harkon, a man, well, monster, whose ambition was so vast it eclipsed his common sense. Imagine the biting cold of the Sea of Ghosts slapping against black jagged rocks, the smell of ancient coppery blood lingering in the air, and a master plan so fundamentally flawed it makes you wonder if immortality actually rots the brain along with the soul. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The winds howling off the Sea of Ghosts are unforgiving, stripping the warmth from anything living that dares to approach the northwestern coast of Harfingar. Here, shrouded in a perpetual unnatural mist, stands Castle Volkihar. It is a monument to hubris, a dark Gothic spire piercing the grey sky, housing a family that has dysfunction down to a literal science. At the centre of this frozen court sits Lord Harkon, a vampire of immense power and ancient lineage. He is a vampire lord, a creature of nightmare who has transcended the petty weaknesses of lesser vampires, or so he thinks. Because for all his power, for all his centuries of accumulated knowledge and magical prowess, Harkon is the architect of what might be the single most foolish plan in the history of Tamriel, the Tyranny of the Sun. Let's really look at this plan. It isn't just a bad idea. It is a suicide pact dressed up as a prophecy. Harkon's obsession, the driving force of the entire Dawnguard DLC, is to blot out the sun. He wants to use the blood of a daughter of Cold Harbour, specifically his own daughter, Serana, to corrupt Oriel's bow, the weapon of the sun god himself. By firing a blood-cursed arrow into the heart of the sun, he intends to shroud the world in eternal night. On paper, or perhaps on an ancient moth-eaten scroll, this sounds appealing to a vampire. No more burning skin, no more hiding in caves during the daylight hours, no more distinct disadvantage against the mortal races who thrive in the sun. It sounds like freedom. But let's apply a tiny bit of logic to this, the kind of logic you might learn in a basic biology class, or perhaps just by observing how a potato grows. The world of Nirn, much like our own, relies on the sun for literally everything. If you turn off the sun, you don't just get a convenient overcast day for vampires to frolic in, you trigger an ecological collapse of absolute magnitude. This is where Harkon's status as a genius villain falls apart. Vampires, by their very nature, are parasitic predators. They are the top of the food chain, but they are a very specific top. They feed exclusively on the blood of the living, specifically sentient mortals like Nords, Imperials and Bretons. Now, consider the food chain. Humans and Mer need to eat. They eat crops, or they eat livestock that eats crops. Crops, as we know, need sunlight to undergo photosynthesis. If Harkon succeeds, and the sun is permanently blackened, plant life dies within weeks. The temperature plummets. Skyrim is already freezing, so imagine an ice age on top of a blizzard. The livestock dies shortly after the plants. Then the humans, the cattle that Clan Volkihar relies on, begin to starve and freeze. Within a year, maybe two, the human population would crash. They would be reduced to scavengers, dying in droves. And what happens to the vampires then? They starve. It's the equivalent of a lion deciding that the best way to rule the savannah is to burn all the grass so the zebras have nowhere to hide. Sure, you catch a few zebras easily in the beginning, but pretty soon you're looking at a barren wasteland and your stomach is rumbling with an hunger that won't go away. Harkon is essentially plotting to burn down his own grocery store because he finds the fluorescent lighting annoying. It is baffling that a being who has lived for thousands of years hasn't considered the sustainability of his food source. You'd think after a few millennia, he might have picked up a book on agriculture, or at least listened to a farmer. But this is the nature of Harkon's arrogance. He views mortals purely as cattle, infinite and replaceable, failing to realise that cattle require a pasture. There is a core in-game fact here that players encounter, often without realising the full implications. When you speak to Serana after rescuing her, she explicitly points out the flaw in her father's logic, though she focuses more on the retaliation aspect. that the mortals would unite and hunt them down. But even she, who has been asleep for eras, seems to grasp that the balance of the world is fragile. The game mechanics actually support this fragility. If you use the blood-cursed arrows to blot out the sun yourself, the effect is temporary, lasting only a day. The world reacts with horror, NPCs cower, and the ambient temperature drops visually. The game shows you exactly what Harkon wants, a world of grey fear. But making that permanent? It's a death sentence for the predator just as much as the prey. Deep within the lore, specifically in books like the Exegesis of Meridnunda, there are hints about the nature of light and the sun in the Elder Scrolls universe. The sun, Magnus, is not just a ball of burning gas, it is a hole in the fabric of reality leading to Aetherius, the source of all magic. This brings us to a rather obscure lore tidbit that makes Harkon's plan even stupider. In the Elder Scrolls Metaphysics, magicka flows into Mundus, the world, through the sun and stars. These are literal tears in the sky left by the Magna G fleeing creation. If Harkon were to successfully blot out or corrupt the sun permanently, he wouldn't just be stopping the light. He could theoretically be severing or corrupting the flow of magicka into the world. Vampires are inherently magical creatures. Their very existence, their reanimation, their powers of stealth and drain life, it's all sustained by magic. By corrupting the source of magic, Harkon could be inadvertently cutting off the battery power that keeps his undead heart beating. He's like a man sawing off the branch he's sitting on while shouting about how much he hates the tree. Fans have debated this Suicide Pact theory for years. A popular topic on lore forums is whether Harkon is simply insane, driven mad by his pact with Molag Bal, or if he's a victim of the Daedric prince's nature. Molag Bal is the prince of domination and the enslavement of mortals. He thrives on suffering. He doesn't necessarily care if his followers survive in the long run, as long as the process creates misery. The theory goes that Bal planted this idea in Harkon's head, knowing full well it would destroy Nirn, because the destruction and the desperate struggle that preceded it would be a delicious feast of negative energy. Harkon thinks he is the master of his destiny, the king of a new age, but in this interpretation, he is just another tool in a Daedric game, a suicide bomber who thinks he's the pilot. It creates a tragic, almost pathetic image of the Vulkihar leader. He stands in his cathedral, surrounded by gargoyles and hanging cages of bones, sipping blood from a silver chalice, lecturing you about power. And all the while, he's blind to the fact that his victory condition is actually a game-over screen for his entire species, and the irony is thick enough to cut with a Daedric dagger. The vampires of Clan Volkihar pride themselves on being the oldest, most powerful vampires in Skyrim. They look down on the feral vampires found in caves, the ones who wear ragged armour and hiss at intruders. Harkon calls them thin-blooded and filth. Yet, those feral vampires, in their simplicity, understand survival better than Harkon. They hunt, they feed, they sleep. They don't try to alter the cosmological constants of the universe. They exist within the ecosystem, however parasitically. Harkon's sophistication has looped back around into stupidity. He has overthought his existence to the point of extinction. Furthermore, consider the daily quality of life. Even if, by some miracle, the ecosystem survived the lack of sunlight, perhaps via magic mushrooms or subterranean farming, though the Nords don't seem like the types to pivot to a fungal-based economy overnight, the psychological toll would be immense. Vampires might enjoy the dark, but the eternal gloom would likely drive the remaining human cattle insane. Fear spoils the meat, or so the saying goes. Adrenaline-filled, terrified cattle might not be the vintage Harkon enjoys. He treats blood like fine wine, discussing its texture and potency. A population living in absolute freezing terror, dying of scurvy and rickets, probably doesn't taste like a premium vintage. It probably tastes like desperation and dirt. This Solar Suicide Pact is the foundation of Harkon's villainy, and it is a cracked foundation. It sets the tone for everything else the clan does. If the ultimate goal is nonsensical, then every step taken toward it is a wasted effort. Every raid, every murder, every political maneuver is in service of a plan that ends with everyone freezing to death in the dark. It strips the fear away from the Vulkihar and replaces it with pity. When you walk into that castle, You aren't seeing a council of dark masterminds, you're seeing a cult seemingly dedicated to freezing themselves to death. And we haven't even touched on the fact that he wants to use a divine weapon associated with the chief deity of the Snow Elves and the Altmer to do this. Auriel is Akatosh. Harkon is trying to use the Time Dragon's own flashlight to break the universe. You have to appreciate the audacity, even if the IQ points are lacking. As we move deeper into the dysfunction of this clan, keep this primary failure in mind. Everything Harkon does hangs on this hook. He is willing to sacrifice his wife, his daughter, and his own safety for a prize that is essentially a poison chalice. It's the ultimate example of be careful what you wish for. Except in this case, the wish is so obviously bad that even the genie would probably ask, "Are you sure about that, buddy?" But surely a clan this old would have other strategies, right? Surely they aren't putting all their eggs in the blow up the sun basket. Well, that brings us to their geographical and military strategy, which, spoiler alert, is just as confused as their ecological one. They live on an island, isolated and hidden, yet they act like they own the province. It's a contradiction that screams insecurity, and it leads us directly into the next major failure of the Volkihar leadership. Let's talk real estate. If you're an ancient vampire lord plotting the subjugation of mankind, location is everything. You want security, you want defensibility, but you also need access to resources, namely, people to eat. Clan Volkihar seems to have nailed the first part. Castle Volkihar is situated on a bleak, misty island far off the coast of Harfingar, disconnected from the mainland of Skyrim. It's accessible only by boat or a very cold swim. Strategically, this is Isolationism 101. Keep your base hidden, hard to reach, and shrouded in mystery. But here is where the strategic isolation versus open warfare contradiction kicks in, and it's a headache for anyone trying to understand Harkon's military doctrine. While physically hiding on a rock in the middle of the ocean, the clan's operational behaviour is shockingly loud. They aren't acting like a hidden cult, they are acting like an invading army, but without the numbers to back it up. Throughout the Dawnguard DLC, players encounter vampire attacks right in the middle of major cities. You'll be in Whiterun, maybe checking the market stalls for cabbages, when suddenly a master vampire and a couple of thralls start blasting drain life spells at Adrian Avenici. This is brazen, it's aggressive, and it is completely counterintuitive to the safety provided by their island fortress. Why hide in the shadows if you're going to punch the Jarl's guards in the face in broad daylight? Or rather, broad twilight. The strength of the vampire mythos lies in fear of the unknown. They are the monsters under the bed, the whispers in the dark. By openly attacking heavily fortified hold capitals like Solitude or Windhelm, Clan Volkihar is effectively announcing, "We are here, we are a problem, please organise a militia to kill us." Consider the geography. To get from Castle Volkihar to Riften, for example, a vampire strike team has to cross the entire province. That's hundreds of miles of hostile territory, patrolled by the Imperial Legion, the Stormcloaks, vigilance of Stendar, and aggressive wildlife. This isn't a surgical strike, it's a logistical nightmare. And for what? To kill a few guards and a blacksmith. The return on investment for these attacks is abysmal. They lose high-ranking vampires, who are supposedly rare and powerful, in exchange for creating mild panic and killing a few replaceable mortals. This erratic behaviour points to a deep confusion in Volkihar leadership. Are they the hidden puppet masters, pulling strings from their misty tower? Or are they a conquering horde? You can't be both. If you are hidden, stay hidden. Manipulate the Jarls, bribe the guards, feed quietly on the beggars. If you are conquerors, amass an army and march. But sending 3 guys to attack the front gate of Whiterun isn't a conquest. It's a nuisance. It's the military equivalent of a prank call. There's a core in-game fact that highlights this stupidity. The Dawnguard. Faction-only reforms. Because the vampire attacks are getting so bold. Isran, the leader of the Dawnguard, explicitly states that the vampires are becoming a menace that can no longer be ignored. If Harkon had just kept his head down, continued his research quietly, and fed discreetly, Isran would still be an angry hermit shouting at clouds in an empty fort. Harkon's aggression created his own worst enemy. He poked the bear, or in this case, the heavily armoured crossbow-wielding fanatics, until they woke up. There is a fascinating, somewhat obscure lore tidbit found in the book Incident at Necrom. It details how vampires in Morrowind often integrated into society, or hid within ancestral tombs to survive, understanding that open conflict with the Dunmer Great Houses and the Temple meant instant annihilation. The Vulkihar seem to have forgotten the lessons of history. They are acting with the arrogance of the First Era, ignoring the fact that mortals in the Fourth Era are better armed, better organised, and very tired of dragons and civil wars. They have no patience left for vampires. This disconnect brings up a fan theory often discussed in the community, the feral madness theory. Some players speculate that Harkon has lost control of his underlings. While the court sits in the castle sipping blood potions, the lesser vampires are sent out on missions they are ill-equipped for, or perhaps they are acting on their own bloodlust. However, the game contradicts this. The attacks are coordinated, they often carry notes or orders. This is sanctioned stupidity. Harkon is approving these suicide missions. It speaks to a fundamental misunderstanding of power projection. Harkon thinks that terrorizing the populace will make them submit. But Skyrim is a land of Nords. Nords don't submit to monsters. They write songs about killing them. Terror doesn't make a Nord cower, it makes him sharpen his axe. Harkon is applying a fear tactic that might work in High Rock or Cyrodiil, maybe, to a culture that glorifies death in battle. Every time a vampire attacks a town, they aren't creating fear, they are creating martyrs and hardening the resolve of the living. Let's look at the castle itself again. It's a magnificent structure, filled with gargoyles, secret passages, and a dining hall that screams evil overlord. It has a bridge that can be raised, thick walls, and it's surrounded by freezing water. It is the perfect defensive turtle shell. Yet, Harkon is constantly sticking his neck out. He has the ultimate safe house, but he treats it like a forward operating base. Imagine the resource drain. Every master vampire lost in a botched raid on Morthal is a loss of centuries of experience. You can't just recruit a new master vampire at the tavern. These are powerful undead who have survived for a long time, until Harkon orders them to go poke a guard in solitude. He's spending his most valuable currency, his experienced lieutenants, like they are copper coins. And let's not forget the Dawnguard scouts. Because of these open attacks, the Dawnguard are actively recruiting. Every time a vampire kills a civilian, Isran gets 3 new volunteers. My brother was killed by vampires. My wife was taken. Harkon is literally acting as the recruitment officer for the organisation dedicated to wiping him out. If he had just stayed on his island and kept the attacks low profile, the Dawnguard would be Isran and 2 guys named Chelan and Durak playing cards in a dusty canyon. Instead, Harkon builds them into an army. It's a classic villain blunder, underestimating the mob. Harkon sees individual mortals as weak, which is true. He can tear a single bandit apart with his bare hands. But he fails to see mortals as a collective force. He doesn't understand that 100 weak mortals with crossbows and fire salts can take down a master vampire. He's stuck in an aristocratic mindset where the peasantry doesn't matter, failing to realise that an angry peasantry with torches is the #1 cause of death for castles. The strategic isolation versus open warfare paradox is a failure of leadership. It shows a lack of clear vision. Harkon wants the safety of the shadows but the ego stroke of open domination. He wants to be the hidden terror and the conquering king. In trying to be both, he fails at both. He exposes his hidden sanctuary to scrutiny by drawing attention to himself, and he fails to conquer anything because he lacks the actual military strength for a full-scale invasion. This isn't 4D chess, it's playing checkers and eating the pieces. It's a flailing, disjointed strategy that serves only to unite his enemies and weaken his own clan. And speaking of weakening the clan, let's talk about resources. Not gold, not weapons, but the most powerful resource in the known universe. An Elder Scroll. You would think, possessing one of the artifacts that literally writes reality into existence, Harkon would have a pretty tight grip on it. You'd think he'd have it locked in a vault surrounded by his best guards, maybe under a pillow he sleeps on. But no. The handling of the Elder Scroll is a comedy of errors so profound it requires its own section. Because why keep the ultimate weapon safe when you can turn it into a parcel for a courier service that hasn't been invented yet? This leads us to the Elder Scroll Delivery Service, a blunder that kickstarts the entire story, and proves that Harkon is not just a bad general, but a terrible father and a worse librarian. Let's talk about the Elder Scrolls themselves for a moment. These aren't just old books, they are fragments of creation, scraps of the divine blueprint used to forge the cosmos. They exist outside of time, they are indestructible, and reading them can drive you blind or insane. They are unequivocally the most valuable items in the entire Elder Scrolls universe. If you have one, you hold a nuclear code for reality. Now, let's look at how Clan Volkihar handles this level of power. We call this blunder the Elder Scroll Delivery Service. Harkon needs the Elder Scrolls to fulfill the Tyranny of the Sun prophecy. Specifically, he needs 2 of them. He starts with none. Why? Because thousands of years ago, his wife, Valerica, who we will get to later, took one of the scrolls, and their daughter, Serana, and hid them. On the surface, Valerica's plan to keep the scroll away from Harkon seems sound. If he can't get the scroll, he can't break the world, but look at how she hid them. She didn't destroy the scroll, impossible. She didn't cast it into the ocean, or bury it in a random field in Elsewhere. She sealed Serana inside a stone monolith within a crypt, holding the scroll on her back, and then just left her there. This is the tactical equivalent of putting your life savings in a glass jar and burying it in the front yard with a sign that says "Do not dig here." For centuries, Serana, a pure-blooded daughter of Cold Harbour and a crucial component of the prophecy, slept in Dim Hollow Crypt, clutching the very item Harkon needed. Dim Hollow is not exactly Fort Knox. It's a dank cave filled with Draugr and eventually vampires. The security system was a mild puzzle involving moving some braziers around. When the game begins, who finds Serana? Is it Harkon's elite guard? Is it a loyal servant? No, it's the Dragonborn, acting on behalf of the Dawnguard, the mortal enemies of the vampires. The Dragonborn strolls in, solves the puzzle in 5 minutes, and pops the lid off the sarcophagus. Out tumbles Serana, holding the Elder Scroll like a forgotten pizza delivery. This is a catastrophic failure of asset management. Valerica essentially turned her daughter into a storage unit. By binding the scroll to Serana, she ensured that if anyone found the girl, they found the weapon. She consolidated 2 high-value targets into one convenient package. It's a buy one, get one free deal for villains or heroes. And what does Serana do? She asks the Dragonborn to take her home, to Castle Volkihar, to Harkon. She hand-delivers herself and the scroll right to the villain's doorstep. Now, consider the sheer luck involved here. If the Dragonborn had been a zealous vampire hunter like Isran, Serana might have been staked the moment she woke up. The scroll would then be in the hands of the Dawnguard, and Harkon would never see it. If the Dragonborn had been a chaotic, evil murder hobo, well, same result. The fact that Serana survives her wake-up call is a miracle, not a strategy. Core in-game fact: the quest Awakening sends you to Dim Hollow Crypt not to find a person, but to find an artifact the vampires are searching for. The vigilants of Stendar were already sniffing around there. The location wasn't as secret as Valerica hoped. The vampires found it. The Dawnguard found it. It was a race, and the hiding place was compromised. There's an obscure lore tidbit that makes this even worse. In Effects of the Elder Scrolls, it is suggested that the scrolls have a will of their own. They want to be found. They drift through history, appearing where momentous events are about to occur. Trying to hide a scroll is like trying to hide water in a sieve. It will eventually leak out. A vampire matriarch as old and magically learned as Valerica should have known that locking a scroll in a box is a temporary solution at best. The scroll calls out to destiny. By locking Serana with it, she condemned her daughter to eventually be found by whoever the scroll chose, in this case, the prisoner Chunt hero. This setup creates a bizarre situation where the villain, Harkon, spends centuries doing nothing, waiting for a delivery he didn't order, while the hero, Valerica, sets up a fail state that almost guarantees the villain gets what he wants eventually. Let's look at the reception at Castle Volkihar. When you arrive with Serana and the scroll, the gatekeeper is surprised. "Lord Harkon will be pleased," he says. Inside, Harkon is just lounging around. He didn't send a retrieval team. He didn't scour the land. He sat on his throne and waited. And it worked. The sheer incompetence of his enemies, his wife, rewarded his laziness. But here is the kicker. Harkon gets the scroll. He has Serana. He has the prophecy components. And what does he do? He lets the Dragonborn leave. He holds the scroll. He holds his daughter. But because he is so arrogant, we're previewing the next section here, He lets the one person capable of stopping him walk out the front door with a pat on the head. He doesn't secure the scroll in a vault, he lets Serana keep it on her back. Throughout the DLC, the Elder Scrolls, Sun, Blood and Dragon change hands repeatedly. They are carried in backpacks, read by blind monks in glades, and traded like baseball cards. At no point does Clan Volkihar treat the scroll with the reverence or security it demands. Imagine if Harkon had simply taken the scroll from Serana the moment she walked in, locked her in a dungeon for her own safety, and then killed the Dragonborn. Game over. Vampires win. Sun goes dark, but he doesn't. He treats the arrival of the ultimate weapon as a casual Tuesday event. Ah, my daughter is back, and she brought the newspaper. Good. Fan theories often try to patch this hole. Some argue that Serana is too powerful to be simply taken from, or that the scroll is bound to her in some magical way. But the game shows us that the Dragonborn can carry the scroll. Dexion the Moth Priest can hold it. It's an item. It can be taken. The bound to Serana theory falls apart when you realise she eventually gives it to you. The Elder Scroll delivery service highlights a lack of urgency and a lack of respect for the power they are trifling with. These vampires treat the tools of creation like quest items to be fetched, rather than dangerous artifacts that reshape reality. It also underscores the dysfunction of the family. Valerica uses Serana as a mule. Harkon uses Serana as a battery. Neither parent sees her as a person. They see her as a container for the things they actually care about, power and revenge. This dehumanization, or devampirization, leads to tactical blindness. They are so focused on the object, the scroll, that they ignore the variable, Serana's loyalty. Harkon assumes that because Serana brought the scroll home, she is on his side. He ignores the fact that she has been locked in a box for eras by his wife, who hates him. He ignores the presence of the stranger, you, who clearly has their own agenda. He sees the scroll and his brain turns off. In the end, the scroll was safer in the crypt. Bringing it to the castle, into the chaotic, backstabbing environment of the Vulkihar court, was the most dangerous thing Serana could have done. And for Harkon, receiving it was the beginning of his end. It gave him the illusion of progress, the false hope that his plan was working, blinding him to the fact that he had just invited his executioner into his living room. Speaking of executioners, let's talk about that stranger who walked in with Serana, the one with the dragon soul and the shout that can level mountains. Harkon's interaction with the Dragonborn is a masterclass in failing a job interview. He has the most powerful mortal on the planet standing in front of him, and instead of recruiting them properly, he insults them. Welcome to Harkon's demigod denial. Picture this. You are the Dragonborn. You have slain Myrmilnir, absorbed the soul of a dragon, perhaps climbed the 7,000 steps to chat with the Greybeards. You might even be the Archmage of Winterhold, or the listener of the Dark Brotherhood. You walk into Castle Volkihar, a place reeking of death and decay, towing the long-lost daughter of the Master of the House. You have done the impossible. You have retrieved an Elder Scroll. And how does Lord Harkon, a being of supposed infinite wisdom and cunning, greet you? I will offer you this gift but once. Turn down my offer, and I will banish you from this castle. Does the blood of the ancients call to you? On the surface, offering the gift of vampirism seems generous. It's a power upgrade. It transforms you into a vampire lord. But look closer at the attitude. Harkon treats you not as an equal, or even a valuable asset, but as a stray dog he might deign to feed. He calls you mortal, with a sneer that you can practically hear through the screen. He dismisses your achievements. He doesn't ask who you are. He doesn't care that you just shouted a troll off a cliff an hour ago. To him, you are nothing but a vessel for his blood. This is Harkon's demigod denial. It is a fatal flaw in his recruitment strategy. In any strategic conflict, talent acquisition is key. When a freelancer walks into your office who has single-handedly dismantled your security protocols and delivered your most precious asset, you don't talk down to them. You hire them. You offer them a partnership. You stroke their ego. Harkon does the opposite. He creates a binary choice. Submit to me and become my spawn, or get out. There is no middle ground. There is no, hey, thanks for bringing my daughter back. Here's 1,000,000 gold coins, maybe we can work together as allies. He demands total submission. For a Dragonborn who has already tasted power, whether it's the voice, lycanthropy, or just high-level smithing, submission is a hard sell. Many players reject Harkon simply because he's a jerk. It's not about morality, it's about spite. You want me to serve you? Buddy, I eat dragons for breakfast, I'm not serving anyone. If you do accept his offer, the dynamic doesn't improve. He becomes your master. He teaches you how to use your powers with the tone of a bored schoolteacher. He sends you on errands. He never treats you as a true partner in his grand design. You're just another tool, slightly shinier than the others. This arrogance blinds him to the threat you pose. If you refuse his offer, he banishes you. He uses his magic to teleport you out of the castle. Think about that. He has a powerful warrior in his sanctum who has just refused to join his cult. This warrior knows where the castle is. This warrior knows Serana is back. This warrior has seen the Elder Scroll, and Harkon just lets you go. He teleports you to the boat landing and locks the gate. This is arguably the dumbest decision in the entire game. If the Dragonborn refuses, Harkon should kill them instantly, right there in the hall. Rip their throat out. Do not let the potential enemy leave with full intel on your operation. By banishing you, he guarantees that you will go straight to the Dawnguard. He manufactures his own nemesis. He hands Isran the weapon he needs to destroy the clan. Core in-game fact. Harkon's banishment spell is a scripted event. You cannot fight back. This proves he has the power to neutralize you at that moment. He could have killed you. He chose not to, out of some twisted sense of mercy, or perhaps just pure dismissal. You're not worth killing, he seems to say. Famous last words. There is a lore aspect here related to the nature of pure-blooded vampires. Harkon is obsessed with purity. He received his vampirism directly from Molag Bal, via a horrific ritual involving the sacrifice of 1,000 innocents, according to Serana. He believes this makes him a god among insects. This supremacy complex is his undoing. He cannot conceive of a mortal being a threat. To him, a mortal with a sword is just a mosquito with a stinger. He forgets that some mosquitoes carry malaria, or in this case, sun-hallowed arrows. In the book Immortal Blood, it is detailed how various vampire clans have different strengths and weaknesses. The Vulkihar are known for their paranoia and their power to freeze victims. Harkon displays the paranoia. He trusts no one, not even his court, but he fails to apply it to the outsider. It's a selective paranoia. He suspects Vingalmo of plotting against him, which he is, but he ignores the heavily armed stranger who just walked in. Fan theory time. Some players speculate that Harkon literally cannot sense the Dragonborn's power. Perhaps the dragon soul masks the mortal aura. To Harkon's vampire senses, maybe you just smell like a regular Nord. He doesn't hear the hum of the Thuum in your blood. If this is true, it's a tragic limitation of his senses, but even then, judging a book by its cover is a rookie mistake for a 4,000-year-old warlord. Furthermore, let's look at the training he provides if you join. He teaches you to turn into a vampire lord. He shows you the skill tree. But he doesn't teach you the deeper secrets of the prophecy until he needs you to fetch things. He compartmentalizes information. He keeps you in the dark. This lack of trust ensures that even a loyal Dragonborn has no emotional connection to Harkon. You serve him for the powers, not the cause. The moment he turns on you, which he inevitably does, you have zero hesitation in putting him down. He fails to build a cult of personality. His court fears him, but they don't love him, and he makes no effort to make you love him. Compare this to other villains or faction leaders. Even Astrid of the Dark Brotherhood tries to welcome you into the family. Mercer Frey pretends to be a mentor. Harkon is just cold, and distant. This demigod denial is a failure of soft power. Harkon relies entirely on hard power, magic, claws, fear. He has no charisma, no diplomatic skill. He assumes his title is enough to command respect. But the Dragonborn is a creature of merit. We respect strength we can see or rewards we can use. Harkon offers a transformation that mechanically has its own drawbacks, weakness to fire, no regeneration in sunlight, and acts like he's given us the keys to the kingdom. It's the arrogance of the old world clashing with the reality of the new. Harkon is a relic. He remembers a time when mortals cowered in mud huts. He hasn't updated his worldview to account for the fact that mortals now trap souls, forge Daedric armor, and slay world-eaters. He's fighting a modern war with an ancient mindset. By dismissing the Dragonborn, he seals his fate. Whether you join him or fight him, his attitude ensures that you will eventually be the one to end him. He creates a rivalry where there could have been an alliance. Imagine if he had said, "You are Dragonborn? Fascinating. Your power combined with mine could rule Tamriel. Let us treat as equals." The story might have ended with the Empire and the Stormcloaks both bowing to the vampire emperors. Instead, we get a banished hero washing up on the shore, dusting off their armour and saying, "All right, Isran, give me a crossbow. I'm going to stick it to that guy." But Harkon isn't the only parent in this family making questionable life choices. We have to look at the other side of the coin. The mother, the runaway, the woman who thought the best place to hide from a vampire was a place filled with undead ghosts. Let's examine Valerica's contribution to the family failure in Valerica's soul-cairn stagnation. Let's shift our gaze from the misty coast of Skyrim to a realm of purple skies, cracked earth, and lightning that never strikes the ground, the soul cairn. This is the plane of oblivion where trapped souls go when they are soul-trapped. It is a bleak, miserable purgatory ruled by the ideal masters, giant floating crystals that feed on spiritual energy. It is quite possibly the worst vacation spot in the Orbis, and this is where Valerica, the matriarch of Clan Volkihar, decided to set up her permanent residence. We call this Valerica's soul cairn stagnation. It is a plan born of desperation, sure, but it evolved into a strategy of pure paralysis. Valerica fled Castle Volkihar to keep the Elder Scroll and herself away from Harkon. She reasoned that Harkon, for all his power, could not, or would not, follow her into the soul cairn. She made a deal with the Ideal Masters, never a good idea, to gain sanctuary. On paper, go where he can't follow is smart, but let's look at the execution. She didn't just hide, she trapped herself. To enter the soul cairn, she had to use a portal in her own laboratory, located inside the castle complex. She locked herself in a box inside her enemy's house. For centuries, perhaps thousands of years, Valerica sat in the boneyard, a fenced-off section of the soul cairn, guarded by keepers, powerful dragon-like undead. She built a small alchemy lab. She brewed potions. She waited and waited and waited. This is the definition of stagnation. While she was hiding, Harkon was still ruling. He was still searching. The world was moving on. Empires rose and fell. The Oblivion Crisis happened. The Great War happened. Valerica missed it all. She removed herself from the board completely. In chess terms, she took her own queen piece and glued it to the bottom of the table. Her plan had no endgame. How long was she going to wait? Until Harkon died. He's immortal. Until he forgot? He's obsessed. There was no victory condition for Valerica. She was merely delaying defeat. It's a defensive strategy with zero offense. You cannot win a war by hiding in a closet forever. When the Dragonborn and Serana finally find her, she is shocked. She is hostile. She refuses to leave. She is so entrenched in her hiding mindset that she can't see that the situation has changed. Serana has to practically beg her to hand over the Elder Scroll. Valerica's first instinct is to say, "No, it's safer here." Safer. In a realm where giant crystals eat your soul? In a place patrolling with wrathmen and mistmen? Valerica's definition of safety is warped. She traded the tyranny of her husband for the tyranny of the Ideal Masters. She's a prisoner in all but name. The barrier protecting the boneyard keeps the keepers out, but it also keeps her in. She's a rat in a cage, proud that the cat can't reach her, ignoring the fact that she's starving in a cage. Core in-game fact. When you meet Valerica, she explains that the Ideal Masters tricked her. They took her payment, souls, and granted her sanctuary, but then they tasked the keepers with ensuring she could never leave. She admits she was outmaneuvered. This proves that her master plan was flawed from the negotiation phase. She trusted Daedric entities known for their deception. For an ancient vampire, this is a rookie mistake. There's an obscure lore tidbit found in the Book of Life and Service, which hints at the nature of the Ideal Masters. They are necromancers who ascended to pure magical form. They are merchants of souls. Valerica, being a daughter of Cold Harbour, is a soul of immense value. By walking into their realm, she essentially walked into a pawn shop and put herself on the shelf. She thought she was a guest. She was inventory. The stagnation also applies to her relationship with Serana. Valerica claims to love her daughter, to be protecting her, but she locked Serana in a crypt for eras and then abandoned her to hide in oblivion. When they reunite, Valerica is cold, critical, and controlling. She mirrors Harkon's behaviour. She sees Serana as a pawn to be moved, not a person. She scolds Serana for bringing the Dragonborn, ignoring the fact that Serana had no other choice. This family dysfunction is the rot at the core of the Volkihar clan. Valerica hates Harkon, but she is just like him. They are both arrogant, controlling and short-sighted. They both view other beings as tools. Valerica just happens to be the tool that got put in storage. Consider the resource cost of her hiding. She took the Elder Scroll, Dragon, with her. This is a scroll that contains knowledge of the dragons, of time, of the fabric of reality, and it sat in a box in the soul cairn. Useless. Think of the knowledge lost. Think of the power wasted. Valerica hoarded this artifact not to use it, but to keep it from being used. It's the ultimate dog-in-the-manger scenario. Fan theory discussion. Many players believe Valerica is actually the smarter villain because she successfully thwarted Harkon for so long. But is it success if you're living in a purple hellscape eating soul husks? Success implies a quality of life. Valerica's quality of life was 0. She existed. She did not live. A true mastermind would have found a way to destroy Harkon, or to ally with powerful forces to overthrow him. Hiding is the tactic of the weak. And let's look at her impact on the plot. By hiding the scroll, she essentially created the fetch quest that drives the DLC. She made herself the MacGuffin, but once the scroll is retrieved, she stays behind. She only returns to the castle after. Harkon is dead. This confirms her passivity. She refuses to fight. She waits for you to do the dirty work. She's the ultimate backseat driver of the vampire apocalypse. Even her laboratory in the castle, the portal entrance, was a missed opportunity. She left her notes there. She left the ingredients, bone meal, purified void salts, soul gem shards, scattered around. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. If she really wanted to be found by no one, she should have destroyed the portal mechanism. Instead, she left the key under the doormat, metaphorically speaking. Valerica's soul cairn adventure is a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolationism. By cutting herself off from the world, she lost perspective. She lost her agency. She became a ghost before she was even dead. And while Valerica was rotting in the soul cairn and Harkon was brooding on his throne, what was the rest of the court doing? Were they uniting? Were they training? No, they were busy stabbing each other in the back. The political structure of Clan Volkihar is a mess of petty squabbles and infighting that makes a high school cafeteria look like a UN summit. Welcome to the court's petty politicking, where the greatest threat to a vampire isn't a Dawnguard crossbow, but a snarky comment from the guy standing next to him. While Harkon stares at the ceiling dreaming of a sunless world, and Valerica counts dust motes in the soul cairn, the rest of Clan Volkihar is busy engaging in their favourite pastime, trying to kill each other. But not in a cool, gladiatorial way. No, they prefer the Mean Girls approach. Snide remarks, political manoeuvring and passive-aggressive pranks. This is the court's petty politicking, and it is the reason why the clan is about as structurally sound as a house of cards in a hurricane. The court is divided into cliques, centred around two primary sycophants, Vingalmo and Orthiolf. Vingalmo is an Altmer vampire, a mage who values ancient blood and magical prowess. He is snobbish, elitist, and looks down on anyone who isn't a high elf or a pureblood. Orthiolf is a Nord, a warrior who values strength and combat. He thinks Vingalmo is a prissy bookworm. These two hate each other with a passion that burns brighter than the sun they're trying to extinguish. Instead of working together to further Harkon's goals, they spend 90% of their time undermining one another. If Vingalmo suggests a plan, Orthiolf opposes it just on principle. If Orthiolf recruits a new thrall, Vingalmo criticises the thrall's posture. It's a constant draining power struggle for the position of Harkon's favourite, a position that frankly isn't worth having because Harkon treats everyone like dirt anyway. When you, the Dragonborn, join the clan, you are immediately thrown into this mess. You get quests from both of them. Vingalmo might ask you to turn a specific person into a vampire to increase his political influence. Orthiolf might ask you to kill a specific target to show off the clan's strength. But often, they give you quests designed to make the other look bad. They're using the clan's newest, most powerful asset, you, as a pawn in their office drama. This internal division is a massive strategic weakness. A divided house cannot stand. If the Dawnguard were to launch a full-scale assault on the castle, which they do eventually, half the vampires would probably hesitate to help the other half. Oh, is Orthiolf getting staked? What a shame. I'll just finish this glass of blood first. Core in-game fact. The Radiant quests, New Allegiances, Vingalmo, and The Hunt, Orthiolf, are explicitly framed as power plays. They aren't about helping the clan, they are about helping them. Vingalmo wants you to turn influential people, like Cyrene or Harron, so he can claim he expanded the clan's reach. Orthiolf wants you to kill a generic vampire to prove that feral vampires are weak. It's busy work. It's middle management trying to justify their existence. There's an obscure lore tidbit in the manifesto of the Cyrodiil Vampirum Order that describes a much more rigid, disciplined structure for vampire clans in Cyrodiil. There, hierarchy is absolute, and obedience is enforced. The Vulkihar, by contrast, are messy. They are decadent. They have been isolated for so long that they have forgotten how to function as a unit. They are bored immortals creating drama to pass the centuries. This politicking distracts from the real threats. While Vingalmo is worrying about whether Orthiolf looked at him funny, the Dawnguard is recruiting trolls and enchanting crossbows. The court is so focused on the internal ladder that they don't see the fire burning the ladder down. Even the lesser members of the court, like Salonia, Kalia and Stalf, are involved. They are the lackeys, the hangers-on who pick sides. It creates an atmosphere of paranoia. You can't trust anyone. You can't leave your drink unattended. It's a toxic workplace environment, literalized. Harkon encourages this, in a way. He believes that competition breeds strength. He pits his underlings against each other, thinking the cream will rise to the top, but in reality the cream just curdles. The constant infighting wastes resources. Vampires are killed or banished because of these squabbles. Potential allies are alienated. The clan is eating itself alive. Imagine if Vingalmo and Orthiolf pooled their resources. Vingalmo's magic combined with Orthiolf's combat prowess would be a formidable force. They could organise tactical strikes, improve castle defences, or actually help locate the Moth priest. Instead, they operate in silos. They hoard information. If Vingalmo found a lead on the scroll, he wouldn't tell Orthiolf. He'd try to pursue it himself to get the glory, probably fail, and then the lead would be lost. This behaviour makes the Volkihar look less like ancient apex predators and more like immortal teenagers. It strips away the majesty of the vampire mythos. We expect Dracula, we get mean girls, we expect a terrifying hive mind, we get a dysfunctional homeowners association. It also highlights a lack of loyalty to the cause. Do Vingalmo and Orthiolf actually care about the tyranny of the sun, or do they just want power? It seems to be the latter. They are riding Harkon's coattails, hoping to snag a piece of the pie when he wins, but if Harkon were to fall, spoiler he does, they would be the first to scatter. There is no ideological glue holding this clan together. It's just a collection of selfish egos sharing a castle. This brings us to a fan theory, the decay of the blood theory. Some fans speculate that the older a vampire gets, the more their mind deteriorates into obsession and pettiness. They lose the ability to see the big picture. Vingalmo and Orthiolf are centuries old. Maybe this behaviour isn't a choice, maybe it's a symptom. The immortality they cherish is slowly turning them into caricatures of themselves. Ultimately, the court's politics serve as a perfect distraction for the player. While you are running errands for these two idiots, you are getting stronger. You are learning the castle layout. You are gathering the artifacts. Their bickering gives you the cover you need to eventually take them all down. They're so busy watching each other that they don't watch you. And while the aristocracy fights over who gets the best seat at the table, let's look at what's on the table. Or rather, who is on the table? The way Clan Volkihar manages its food supply is not just cruel, it's inefficient, unsanitary, and frankly, a health code violation of the highest order. We're moving from the boardroom to the barn. Let's talk about the human cattle paradox. In the dark, damp underbelly of Castle Volkihar, far below the grand cathedral where Harkon gives his speeches, lies the pantry. But this isn't a pantry stocked with sacks of flour or barrels of mead. It is stocked with people. Living, breathing, terrified people, the human cattle. This is one of the most disturbing aspects of the vampire lifestyle, but from a logistical standpoint, it is also one of the most poorly managed. We call this the human cattle paradox. The vampires need blood to survive. It is their fuel, their food, their addiction. Yet the way they treat their source of sustenance is bafflingly short-sighted. The cattle are kept in cells, often standing or sitting in filth. They are thralls, magically seduced or mentally broken into submission. They don't fight back, they just stand there, glazed-eyed, waiting to be fed upon. It's horrifying, yes, but let's look at the efficiency. Vampires, especially powerful ones like the Vulkihar, need high-quality blood. Blood is life. A healthy victim provides better nourishment than a sickly one. Yet the conditions in the cattle pens are atrocious. It's cold, freezing actually, since they're on an island in the Sea of Ghosts. The hygiene is non-existent. There is no sunlight, obviously. The food they're given, if they're fed at all, is likely scraps. These humans are essentially wasting away. They are malnourished, stressed, and likely riddled with disease. Feeding on a diseased, starving human is like eating a rotten apple. It might fill your stomach, but it's not going to give you the energy you need. It might even make you sick. Consider the sanguinaire vampirist disease itself. It is transmitted through scratches or bites. If the cattle are constantly being bitten by different vampires, cross-contamination is rampant. Who knows what other diseases are brewing in that dungeon? Rock joint? Ataxia? The vampires are drinking from a communal cup that has never been washed. Core in-game fact: you can walk into the cattle pens and see the thralls. They are labelled vampire cattle. They wear rags. They have no beds, just hay on the cold stone floor. If you bite them, they don't resist, but they also don't regenerate. Once they're drained, they die. And then what? The vampires have to go out and get more. This constant need to replenish the stock creates a massive security risk. Every time a vampire goes out to kidnap a new victim, they risk exposure. They risk being seen. They risk being followed. If they maintained a smaller, healthier population of cattle, perhaps breeding them or treating them like prized livestock, they wouldn't need to hunt as often. They could be self-sustaining. But no, they treat humans like disposable cups. Drink, crush, toss. There is an obscure lore tidbit in The Immortal Blood about the cyrodiilic vampires who infiltrate society. They feed on sleeping victims, leaving them alive to regenerate blood. They understand that a renewable resource is better than a finite one. The Vulkihar, in their arrogance, have forgotten this. They consume with the gluttony of a beast, not the refinement of a lord. Imagine if they had a spa wing. Humans are kept in comfort, fed rich foods, kept warm and happy. Happy cows make better milk. Surely happy humans make better blood. Adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones, sour the taste, according to some vampire fiction tropes, and even in Elder Scrolls lore, the emotional state of the victim can affect the potency of the blood. Terror might be tasty to Molag Bal, but for pure nutritional value, a healthy, robust Nord warrior is probably better than a shivering, half-dead beggar. The paradox is that the Volkihar consider themselves the elite, the civilized vampires. They turn their noses up at the savages in the caves, yet their own feeding habits are barbaric. They lack the sophistication to create a sustainable ecosystem within their own walls. Furthermore, the thralls are a wasted labour force. They just stand there. Why aren't they cleaning the castle? Why aren't they cooking for the mortal guests, if there were any, or maintaining the armour? They are unused assets. They are purely food, nothing else. It's a waste of potential. And what about the psychological impact on the vampires? If your only interaction with mortals is seeing them as shivering, broken cattle, you lose touch with what makes mortals dangerous. You forget their cunning, their will, their capacity for violence. You start to see them as sheep. This reinforces the arrogance we discussed earlier. When a sheep suddenly pulls out a Dawnbreaker and sets you on fire, you are caught completely off guard. The management of the cattle also falls to the lower-ranking vampires, like Garen Morethi or Ronthil. But do they look like they know animal husbandry? No, they are courtiers. They probably view the cattle maintenance as a demeaning chore. So it gets neglected. The pens get dirtier, the cattle get sicker. Fan theories suggest that perhaps the thrall magic sustains the victims, keeping them alive longer than natural physics would allow. That the magic effectively pauses their metabolism, but even if true, it doesn't change the fact that they are finite. Eventually the blood runs dry. The vampire cattle act as living blood potions, but even a potion bottle becomes empty. The wastefulness is staggering. In a world where the Dawnguard is hunting them, every trip to the mainland is a risk. Why maximise that risk by burning through your food supply so quickly? A smart clan would have a blood tax on the local villages. Give us one healthy volunteer a month and we won't burn your town down. A terrifying but sustainable arrangement. The Vulkihar just steal people in the night, creating panic and drawing attention. It's another example of short-term thinking. Harkon wants his blood now. He doesn't care about tomorrow. He doesn't care about the logistics. He is an addict and the castle is his crack house. So we have a clan that can't plan a menu, can't manage its livestock and can't stop fighting itself. But surely when it comes to the arcane arts, to the deciphering of the Elder Scrolls, they must be competent. They are ancient wizards after all. Well, enter the Moth priests, the only people in Tamriel who can read the Elder Scrolls. Harkon needs one. Does he send a diplomat? Does he offer a trade? No. He sends a kidnapping squad to grab a blind old man and drag him to a dungeon. This is Misreading the Moth priests, and it's about as successful as asking a hostage to do your taxes. We have established that Clan Volkihar has the strategic acumen of a drunken mudcrab and the family dynamic of a pack of starving wolves. But surely when it comes to the arcane arts, the very fabric of magic and prophecy, they must know what they are doing. After all, Harkon has based his entire existence on a prophecy written in the Elder Scrolls. To read these scrolls, you need a specialist. You need technical support. You need a Moth priest. This brings us to Misreading the Moth priests, a blunder that showcases Harkon's inability to understand the delicate nature of the tools he is trying to use. The Elder Scrolls are encrypted by the universe itself. You can't just open one up and read it like the morning newspaper. If a normal person looks at the glyphs, they go blind or insane. Even the Dragonborn, a being with the soul of a demigod, gets a headache and blurry vision. The only people capable of deciphering them safely, and safely is a relative term here, are the cult of the ancestor Moth. These are monks who spend their entire lives training their minds to endure the cosmic radiation the scrolls emit. So, Harkon has the scroll, thanks to you and Serana. Now he needs the reader. His solution? Go find a Moth priest and drag him here. This is the equivalent of needing a neurosurgeon to perform a life-saving operation. So you kidnap one, hit him over the head with a club, drag him to a damp dungeon and yell, "Operate." It is a strategy that fundamentally misunderstands the asset. A Moth priest is not a warrior. He is a scholar. He's also usually quite old and frail. Dexion Evicus, the priest in question, is an imperial researcher. When the vampires locate him, he is travelling through Skyrim. Instead of approaching him with a ruse, perhaps posing as eager scholars, or offering him protection in these dangerous times, the vampires attack his caravan, they kill his guards, they capture him. This is loud. It draws attention. It leaves a trail of bodies. But more importantly, it traumatizes the very mind Harkon needs to be clear and focused. When you track Dexion down for the vampires, he's being held inside a magical barrier, guarded by a few thralls. This leads to our core in-game fact. In the quest, the Prophet, Dexion isn't just a helpless old man. When the thralls are defeated, he engages you in combat. He uses magic. He resists. You have to beat him into submission before you can use your vampire seduction power on him. Think about that process. To get the technical support you need, you have to physically assault the technician until he is near death, and then mind rape him with vampire magic. Harkon's plan relies on the vampire seduction ability to turn Dexion into a thrall. A thrall is an obedient slave. They do what they're told. But does a thrall retain the complex cognitive abilities required to interpret the metaphysics of creation? Reading an Elder Scroll isn't just about translating text. It is an act of spiritual communion with the timeline. It requires intuition, willpower, and clarity. By enthralling Dexion, Harkon is essentially lobotomizing him. He is turning a supercomputer into a pocket calculator. He risks damaging the priest's mind so severely that the reading becomes gibberish. It's a massive gamble. If Dexion's mind snaps under the pressure of the enthrallment and the scroll simultaneously, the prophecy is lost. Harkon has no backup plan. There is no Moth Priest B team. Furthermore, let's consider the obscure lore tidbit found in Pension of the Ancestor Moth. This text details the life of the priests in the Imperial City. It explains that the reading of the scrolls is a ritualistic, solemn event. It requires preparation. It requires the presence of the ancestor moths to maintain the connection to the song of the universe. Harkon skips all the prep work. He doesn't provide a sanctuary. He doesn't gather the moths. That comes later. and only because the game forces you to go to the glade. He just demands the reading be done in the middle of his noisy, blood-soaked cathedral. Read it now, slave. It is the height of impatience. The stupidity is compounded by the fact that Dexion is blind. Well, he wears a blindfold because his sight is fading from reading scrolls, but he eventually goes fully blind. Kidnapping a blind man is easy, sure, but navigating a blind man through the complexities of a prophecy requires patience the Volkihar do not possess. There is also the issue of the false reading. Because Dexion is under duress, either enthralled by vampires or pressured by the Dawnguard, he makes mistakes. He misinterprets things. He sends you on wild goose chases. If Harkon had treated Dexion with respect, perhaps seduced him with promises of forbidden knowledge or extended life, he might have gotten a willing collaborator. A willing collaborator works harder and smarter than a slave. Harkon could have offered Dexion the one thing a Moth priest might actually want: eyes that work. Vampirism cures diseases and grants vampires sight. Imagine the pitch. Join us, Dexion. Become one of us. You will have eternity to read the scrolls and your eyes will never dim again. It's a compelling offer. It targets the priest's greatest fear, blindness, and offers a solution. But Harkon is too arrogant to negotiate. He sees mortals as cattle. You don't negotiate with a cow. You herd it. This dehumanization blinds him to the potential of a strategic alliance. This brings us to a popular fan theory to our community debate. Why didn't Harkon just learn to read the scrolls himself? He is thousands of years old. He has an eternity to study. Serana mentions that becoming a Moth priest takes a lifetime of dedication. Well, Harkon has had 50 lifetimes. He has a library. He has resources. Is he just lazy? Or is there something about the undead nature that prevents them from communing with the Aedra-aligned magic of the scrolls? Some loremasters argue that because vampires are creatures of Molag Bal, a Daedra, they are fundamentally incompatible with the Aedric nature of the scrolls, meaning they need a mortal interface. They need a converter to process the signal. If this theory is true, it makes the mistreatment of Dexion even more egregious. If the mortal priest is the only piece of hardware that can process the data Harkon needs, he should be treating Dexion like a Fabergé egg. He should be wrapping him in cotton wool and feeding him premium soup. Instead, he treats him like a broken toaster that he needs to kick to make work. Let's look at the result of this mismanagement. In the vampire storyline, Dexion reads the scroll, gives you the next location, and then he just hangs around. He becomes a useless thrall. He stands in the castle, moaning about his headache. He is a spent resource. Harkon used him up in one go. If the prophecy had required a second reading, or a clarification. Too bad. Dexion is fried. Harkon burned out the bulb to see the room for 5 seconds. And let's not forget the sheer luck involved. The only reason Dexion was in Skyrim was because of the rumours of the Dragonborn and the Dawnguard. If Harkon had been more subtle, Dexion might never have come north. Harkon is relying on serendipity. He sat in his castle for eras, and only when a priest randomly wandered into his backyard did he make a move. That's not a plan, that's procrastination. The Moth priest capture is a microcosm of the entire Vulkihar failure. It is brute force applied to a delicate problem. It is the tactical equivalent of trying to thread a needle with a sledgehammer. It works, technically, but you break the needle, the thread, and the table in the process. Harkon gets the info he needs, but he learns nothing from it. He doesn't respect the complexity of the task. He hears Oriel's bow, and his eyes light up, and he stops listening to the warnings or the nuance. He treats the prophecy like a shopping list. And while Harkon is busy breaking the mind of an elderly monk, let's look at the security of the castle itself. You'd think with all these high-value prisoners and ancient artifacts, the castle would be guarded by elite warriors. But no. The primary defense force of Castle Volkihar consists of stonework, animated stonework. Let's talk about the gargoyles. They look scary, sure. They add a nice gothic ambience to the room, but as a security system, they are about as effective as a keep out sign written in crayon. Welcome to Gargoyles as Security Guards, where we examine why relying on statues to protect your life is a rocky proposition. Let's talk about interior design choices that double as terrible security measures. When you walk into Castle Volkihar, you're immediately struck by the Gothic aesthetic. The high vaulted ceilings, the eerie green lighting, the blood-stained banquet tables, and of course the statues. Everywhere you look there are gargoyles, hunching over archways, perching on pillars, looming in corners. But these aren't just decorations. They are the castle's primary defense system against intruders. These gargoyles are magical constructs animated by ancient vampiric sorcery to ambush anyone who isn't supposed to be there. Sounds cool, right? A castle that defends itself. But let's look at the practicality of gargoyles as security guards. First, the element of surprise. A gargoyle attack relies almost entirely on the intruder not knowing the statue is alive. They burst out of their stone shells, roaring and swiping. It's a jump scare. But here's the problem. Everyone knows about them. Any vampire hunter worth their salt knows that if they see a gargoyle in a vampire lair, it's probably going to wake up. The Dawnguard, specifically, trained for this. Isran probably has a Gargoyle Identification 101 class. Does it look like a statue? Shoot it with a crossbow bolt just in case. The element of surprise works once. After that, it's just a statue that is predictably going to attack you. It becomes a routine hazard, like a loose floorboard, rather than a tactical advantage. Second, let's look at their combat effectiveness. Gargoyles are brutes. They have high health, they hit hard with their claws, and they can absorb health from their enemies. But they are slow, they are dumb, they have the AI of angry rock, they charge in a straight line, they don't use tactics, they don't flank, they don't communicate. Against a stealthy intruder, like say a thief, an assassin, or a clever Dragonborn, gargoyles are useless. You can sneak past them easily because they are dormant until triggered. If you have a high enough sneak skill, you can walk right under their noses, do they have noses, and they won't even twitch. They are motion sensors with a very short range. Core in-game fact, gargoyles are scripted to activate at specific proximity triggers. If you snipe a vampire from across the room, the gargoyles often stay asleep. They don't react to sound or the death of their masters unless the script tells them to. This makes them a purely reactive defense. A proactive defense, like a patrol of death hounds or actual vampire guards, would be far more effective. And speaking of death hounds, the castle has those too, but they are treated like pets, wandering the dining hall hoping for scraps. They aren't organised into patrol routes. The gargoyles are static, the hounds are aimless. The castle's security is essentially hope the intruder trips over something. Then there is the issue of collateral damage. When a gargoyle activates, it explodes out of its stone casing. Debris flies everywhere. Imagine you are Vingalmo, walking down the hall carrying a tray of expensive alchemical ingredients. A gargoyle activates because it's sensed a skeever. Boom! Rocks everywhere. Your potions are ruined. Using explosive statues inside your own home is a logistical nightmare. The cleanup costs alone must be astronomical. Who sweeps up the rubble? The thralls? We already established they are overworked and starving. There is an obscure lore tidbit in the bestiary of the Jagged Coast that describes gargoyles as constructs of pure malice, bound to the location of their creation. They cannot leave the castle. This limits their utility. If the Dawnguard sets up a siege camp outside the bridge, the gargoyles can't go out and fight them. They are house cats made of granite. They are strictly indoor pets. This limitation means Harkon has zero exterior projection of force. He can't send a flight of gargoyles to attack a village. He can only use them to defend the hallway. It's a defensive strategy that assumes the enemy is already inside the gates. By the time your gargoyles are fighting, you have already lost the perimeter. Fan theory discussion. Some players speculate that the gargoyles are actually former vampires who displeased Harkon, encased in stone as punishment, and forced to serve as mindless guardians. This fits Harkon's cruelty. It would explain why there are so many of them. If true, it means his security force is made up of people who probably hate him. Would you fight hard for the guy who turned you into lawn furniture? Probably not. You'd do the bare minimum. Roar, swipe. Oh look, I crumbled. Guess I'm done. Compare this to other factions. The Dark Brotherhood has a magic door that asks riddles. The Thieves Guild has a secret entrance in a graveyard and a sewer system filled with traps. The College of Winterhold has a magical barrier. The Vulkihar have rocks that punch you. It's primitive. It lacks the sophistication of a magical society. Where are the rune traps? Where are the illusion spells to confuse invaders? Where are the summoned Daedra? Harkon relies on brute strength because that is all he understands. He thinks that if something is big and heavy, it is strong. He ignores the subtle arts of defense. And let's look at the Vampire Lord transformation itself. which includes a summon gargoyle spell. This implies that gargoyles are magically summoned entities, not just physical statues. If Harkon can summon them at will, why does he need static ones cluttering up the hallway? It's redundant. The reliance on gargoyles also creates a false sense of security. Harkon sits on his throne thinking, I have 50 gargoyles between me and the door, I am safe. This complacency allows him to let his guard down. He doesn't wear armour, he doesn't keep a weapon drawn, he trusts the rocks, but rocks can be broken. A warhammer, a pickaxe, or a well-placed fireball turns a gargoyle into gravel very quickly. The Dawnguard brings heavy weaponry. They bring trolls. A gargoyle versus an armoured troll is a fight the gargoyle loses 9 times out of 10. So the castle is defended by blind monks, starving cattle, bickering politicians, and statues that are easily bypassed. It is a fortress of incompetence. But let's step back from the castle for a moment and look at the bigger picture. The really big picture, the end of the world picture. Harkon wants to block out the sun. We talked about the food chain, but there is another consequence he hasn't considered. Something colder, something deadlier, something that doesn't care if you're alive or undead. Climate change. Not the slow kind we worry about. The instant, catastrophic kind. If the sun goes out, Skyrim, a province already known for being a frozen wasteland, becomes absolute zero. This is the ecological collapse theory, and it's the reason why Harkon's victory would be a frozen tomb for everyone, himself included. We've discussed the food shortage, we've discussed the military blunders, but there is a simpler, more visceral problem with blotting out the sun that Harkon, in his infinite wisdom, seems to have overlooked. It involves a basic thermometer. Skyrim is the northernmost province of Tamriel. It borders the Sea of Ghosts. It is famous for blizzards, glaciers, and men with beards so thick they double as scarves. It is already cold. Now, imagine turning off the only heat source in the solar system. Welcome to the ecological collapse theory, or as I like to call it, Harkon's Big Freeze. The sun, Magnus, is the primary source of light and heat for Mundus. If you successfully shroud the world in the tyranny of the sun, you aren't just creating a spooky twilight, you're plunging the planet into a deep, catastrophic ice age. We aren't talking about a wear an extra sweater kind of cold. We are talking about the atmosphere condensing, the oceans freezing solid, and the air becoming too cold to breathe. Harkon seems to operate under the Hollywood night logic, where darkness just means it's cool and mysterious. He forgets that in reality, darkness usually means a rapid drop in temperature. Without the sun's radiation, the surface temperature of Skyrim would plummet within days. Let's look at the vampire physiology. Yes, they are undead. Yes, they have a natural resistance to frost. In Skyrim, being a vampire gives you a nice percentage boost against ice magic, but resistance is not immunity. Vampires are still physical beings. They have flesh, they have muscles, and crucially, they rely on fluids. Here is the grotesque reality of Harkon's victory. Blood freezes. Blood is mostly water. If the ambient temperature drops to 50 or 60 degrees below freezing, which is a conservative estimate for a sunless Skyrim, every living thing outside of a volcanic vent turns into a statue. The cattle in the dungeons, frozen solid. You can't drain a block of ice. Harkon would be walking through his dungeon trying to chip a meal out of a thrall like he's mining for ore. Even the vampires themselves would suffer. If their own tissues freeze, can they move? Do their joints lock up? They might be immortal, meaning they won't die from the cold, but spending eternity frozen in a block of ice, conscious but immobile, sounds less like ruling the world and more like a fate designed by a cruel Daedric prince. Wait, Molag Bal is a cruel Daedric prince. Maybe that's the point. There is a core in-game fact that illustrates the severity of Skyrim's climate even with the sun. In the survival mode added to the game, and built into the lore of the environment, the Dragonborn can freeze to death in the Pale or Winterhold just by standing still for too long. The environment is already hostile. The sun is the only thing keeping the northern holds habitable. You see Nords huddled around fires, complaining about the chill. Remove the sun, and those fires go out. You can't gather firewood if the forests are buried under 50 feet of snow, or if the trees have shattered from the extreme cold. This brings us to a fascinating and obscure lore tidbit involving the continent of Atmora. Atmora lies to the north of Skyrim and is the ancestral homeland of the Nords. according to the Pocket Guide to the Empire 3rd edition, Atmora has become a frozen wasteland where there is no life, only winter. Expeditions there find nothing but ice and stasis. It is suggested that the freeze in Atmora is not just climatic but metaphysical, that the land effectively died or paused. By blotting out the sun, Harkon is essentially turning Tamriel into Atmora. He is importing the apocalypse of his ancestors. The Nords fled Atmora to escape the freezing death. Harkon wants to bring it back. It creates a dead world, a world where nothing happens. Vampires, who crave stimulation, power, and the hunt, would find themselves rulers of a silent white grave. Fan theories often debate the magical heating counterargument. Some loyalists to the Volkihar cause argue that the Red Mountain in Morrowind or the geothermal vents in Eastmarch, like the ones near Kynesgrove, would keep the world warm. But this is wishful thinking. A few hot springs cannot heat a continent. At best, the remaining population of Tamriel would be reduced to huddled masses fighting for space around a few sulphur-smelling vents in the ground. And guess who controls the Red Mountain? The Dunmer. Guess who controls the vents in Skyrim? Dragons and giants. Harkon would have to fight for the radiators. Furthermore, let's talk about the ecological collapse of the ocean. The Sea of Ghosts is treacherous, but it flows. If the sun vanishes, the sea freezes, the trade routes stop, the fish die, the hawkers die. The entire aquatic ecosystem which supports the coastal cities of Solitude, Dawnstar and Windhelm collapses. Harkon's castle is on an island. If the ocean freezes, his natural moat is gone. The castle becomes accessible by foot from any direction. He loses his one strategic advantage, isolation. An army could march across the ice from High Rock or Hammerfell to siege him. Not that they would need to, since everyone would be too busy freezing to death, but the tactical point stands. This environmental blindness highlights Harkon's disconnect from the physical world. He has spent so long inside his stone walls, sustained by magic and thralls, that he has forgotten how the world works. He assumes the environment is just a backdrop for his glory, rather than a complex system that sustains his existence. He's like a virus that kills the host too quickly. A smart parasite keeps the host alive. A smart villain keeps the world habitable so there is something left to rule. Harkon wants to be the king of nothing. Consider the tyranny of the sun name itself. It implies that the sun is an oppressor, but for a vampire the sun is a restriction, not an oppressor. It restricts their movement to the night. By removing the restriction, Harkon destroys the playing field. It's like a football player hating the sidelines, so he blows up the stadium. Sure, there are no more out-of-bounds lines, but there's also no game. And what about the other provinces? Skyrim is cold, but what about Valenwood or Black Marsh? The sudden temperature drop would be even more devastating to the flora and fauna there, which aren't adapted to cold. The hiss trees in Black Marsh would die. The great great oaks of Valenwood would wither. Harkon would be responsible for the greatest mass extinction event since the Dawn era. This level of destruction would likely draw the attention of powers far greater than the Dawnguard. The Sigic Order? They intervened for the Eye of Magnus. Surely they'd show up for the end of the sun. The Daedric princes, Meridia, who hates undead, and Azura, goddess of dusk and dawn, would likely take personal offence to Harkon breaking the sky. He's inviting cosmic retaliation. Harkon thinks he is fighting a war against mortals. In reality, with this plan, he is declaring war on physics, biology, and the divine order of the Orbis, and physics always wins. The sheer impracticality of the frozen hellscape scenario makes you wonder if Harkon has ever actually been outside. Does he know what snow is? Does he understand that when water gets cold, it gets hard? It seems he has romanticised the darkness to the point of delusion. He imagines a world of eternal gothic night, a velvet darkness where vampires glide effortlessly. He doesn't imagine the howling winds, the cracking stone, and the silence of a dead biosphere. It is the ultimate failure of imagination. He cannot foresee the consequences of his own wish. He's a child playing with matches in a library, thinking the fire will give him better reading light, not realising he's about to burn the whole building down. And speaking of burning, or rather, the beings who enjoy that sort of thing, we need to talk about the manager, the CEO of this bad idea, the entity who gave Harkon his power in the first place. Harkon calls himself a son of Coldharbour, indirectly, as the term usually applies to the females, but he is a pure-blooded lord. He serves Molag Bal. He thinks he has a special relationship with the god of schemes, but anyone who knows their lore knows that dealing with Molag Bal is a zero-sum game where you always lose. Harkon believes he is a partner. In reality, he is a prank. Let's examine Molag Bal's bad bargain, and why trusting the Prince of Domination is the definition of insanity. In the corporate ladder of the cosmos, Lord Harkon thinks he's a regional manager with a corner office and stock options. In reality, he's an unpaid intern working for a boss who actively enjoys watching his employees suffer. That boss is Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination, enslavement, and the rape of souls. Harkon's entire identity is wrapped up in his pact with Molag Bal. He sacrificed 1,000 innocents to earn the title of Vampire Lord. He considers this his greatest achievement, the source of his superiority, but he fails to understand the fundamental nature of the entity he serves. We call this Molag Bal's bad bargain. Molag Bal's sphere is not just domination over mortals, it is the domination of everything, including his own followers. He does not have allies. He does not have favourites. He has playthings. He grants power only to create chaos, strife, and misery. When Harkon asks for the power to blot out the sun, Bal grants the means, the prophecy, the bloodline, not because he wants Harkon to succeed, but because the attempt itself creates delicious suffering. Think about the end goal. If Harkon succeeds, he rules a dead, frozen world. What does Molag Bal get out of that? A dead world is static. It's boring. Molag Bal thrives on the struggle, the breaking of wills. A world where everyone is already broken or dead offers no new sport. It is entirely possible that Molag Bal wants Harkon to fail. The struggle of the Dawnguard, the betrayal by Serana, the death of Harkon, this is the drama Bal enjoys. It's reality TV for Daedra. There is a core in-game fact that supports this. Molag Bal is completely silent during the Dawnguard DLC. He doesn't intervene to help Harkon. He doesn't send reinforcements from Cold Harbour, other than the standard summons. He doesn't stop the Dragonborn, who might be the champion of another prince like Hermaeus Mora or Meridia, from killing his champion. He watches Harkon flail and die with total indifference. Harkon screams about his power, about his birthright, but the phone line to headquarters is dead. Compare this to other Daedric princes. Mehrunes Dagon actively invaded. Hermaeus Mora constantly meddles to protect his secrets. Meridia speaks directly to you to guide her beacon. Molag Bal, he ghosts Harkon. This silence speaks volumes. It implies that Harkon is not an important asset. He is a disposable experiment. There is an obscure lore tidbit in The House of Troubles that describes Molag Bal's nature as the king of rape. He violates the natural order. His gift of vampirism is a curse disguised as a blessing. It corrupts the soul and binds it to Cold Harbour. When a pure-blooded vampire like Harkon dies, his soul goes straight to Cold Harbour. And what happens there? Does he get a castle? A throne? No. In the Elder Scrolls Online, players visit Cold Harbour and see how Bal treats his subjects. They are tortured. They are slaves. The Dremora whip them. The soul-shriven toil eternally. Harkon is fighting to rule a kingdom on Nirn, unaware that his eternal retirement plan involves being a battery in a Daedric torture chamber. He's working hard to earn a promotion to Eternal Victim. This lack of foresight is astounding for a man who claims to be so wise. He should know that Daedric princes are tricksters. Clavicus Vile screws you over with wordplay. Sheogorath drives you mad. Molag Bal dominates you. It's in the name. By accepting Bal's blood, Harkon submitted to domination. He thinks he is the master, but he is the ultimate slave. Fan theory discussion. The Planemeld 2.0. Theory. Some fans speculate that the Tyranny of the Sun was intended to weaken the barriers between Mundus and Cold Harbour, allowing a second plane meld, like in Ezo. If the Sun, Magicka, is blocked, the liminal barriers might fail. In this scenario, Harkon is unwittingly opening the door for Bal to invade. If Bal invades, Harkon won't be king of Skyrim. He'll be crushed under the boot of a Daedric titan. He is the guy unlocking the back door for the burglars, thinking they'll let him keep the TV. Harkon's obsession with purity also stems from this bad bargain. He mocks half-breeds and mongrels. He believes his connection to Bal makes him superior. But this purity is just a stronger chain. The more pure the vampire, the tighter Bal's grip. A feral vampire might just be a monster. A vampire lord is a branded property of Coldharbour. Let's look at the psychology of the abuse victim here. Harkon is mimicking his abuser. Molag Bal dominates, so Harkon dominates. Bal is cruel, so Harkon is cruel. He has no identity of his own. He is a hollow reflection of a dark god. He sacrificed his wife and daughter to please a distant father figure who doesn't care about him. It's tragic, in a you're a monster but also an idiot kind of way. Consider Serana's reaction. She is also a daughter of Coldharbour. She went through the degrading ritual to get her powers, but she hates it. She rejects Bal. She rejects the prophecy. She sees the gift for what it is, a curse that destroyed her family. Serana is the smart one. She realizes the bargain was bad and tries to break the contract. Harkon is the fool who keeps paying the subscription fee for a service that is ruining his life. The Vampire Lord form itself is the physical manifestation of this bargain. It turns Harkon into a grotesque beast. He loses his elven refinement. He becomes a monster. It's a visual metaphor for what Bal does. He strips away your humanity or mermanity and leaves only the beast. Harkon loves this form. He thinks it's beautiful. It shows how warped his perception has become. Ultimately, serving Molag Bal is a pyramid scheme. Bal is at the top, the demi-princes and Dremora lords are in the middle, Harkon is at the bottom, recruiting new members, you, to try and move up. But you never move up in a pyramid scheme. You just alienate your friends and eventually get arrested or staked. Harkon dies screaming, "No, no, I'm the master of my own fate," but he never was. From the moment he slit the throats of those 1,000 innocents, his fate was sealed. He was just a pawn on a board he couldn't see, playing a game he couldn't win for a prize that wasn't real. And speaking of that Vampire Lord form, the one he's so proud of, the one he thinks makes him invincible, let's take a closer look at it from a combat perspective. Because for an ultimate form, it sure does have a lot of design flaws. It's clunky, it's big, and it makes getting stuck in doorways a legitimate tactical concern. Welcome to the Vampire Lord form flaw. We've talked about the bad plans, the bad politics, and the bad boss. Now let's talk about the bad body. The crown jewel of Harkon's power, the gift he dangles in front of you like a piece of candy, is the ability to transform into a Vampire Lord. He sells it as the pinnacle of evolution, a state of being that transcends mortality. Behold, he says, the power of the ancients. And then he turns into a grey, leathery, floating bat monster that looks like it's skipped leg day for the last 4,000 years. This is the Vampire Lord form flaw, and it is a masterclass in style over substance. Mechanically and practically, the Vampire Lord form is a logistical nightmare. When you, or Harkon, transform, you grow significantly in size. You sprout wings, you hover off the ground. On an open battlefield, this might be intimidating. But remember where the Volkihar live, in a castle full of narrow hallways, winding staircases, and standard-sized doorframes. Core in-game fact: one of the most frustrating aspects of playing as a Vampire Lord in Skyrim is that you literally cannot fit through many doorways. You are too tall and too wide. To move from one room to another, you often have to revert to your humanoid form, walk through the door, and then wait for the cooldown to transform again. Harkon, who lives in this castle, has effectively chosen a combat form that renders him unable to chase an intruder into a bathroom. If you run into a closet, the ultimate predator is defeated by a door jam. Then there is the issue of the hover. The Vampire Lord floats. This looks spooky, sure, but it also means you have zero traction. You're drifting like a balloon. In combat, stability is key. A Nord warrior plants his feet to swing a warhammer. A Vampire Lord just wafts. This lack of grounding makes them feel floaty and imprecise. It also makes them a massive airborne target. When you're hovering 3 feet off the ground, you are the perfect height for every crossbowman in the room. You aren't crouching in the shadows, you're presenting your entire surface area to the enemy. Here I am, please aim for the glowing chess piece. It is the opposite of stealth, which is supposed to be a vampire's greatest asset. Let's discuss defense. When you transform, you lose the benefit of your armor. All that enchanted Daedric plate or dragon scale armor you crafted, gone, replaced by Vampire Lord armor, which is essentially your own toughened skin. Unless you invest heavily in the perk tree, which Harkon presumably has, but still, You're often squishier in this form than you are as a well-equipped mortal. You become a glass cannon, able to dish out damage with blood magic but crumbling under sustained fire. And what is that damage? The Drain Life spell is powerful, yes. The grip telekinesis is fun, but against high-level enemies, like say, a legendary dragon hunter clad in enchanted gear, it's often less effective than a simple sword to the face. Harkon relies on magic that can be resisted. A Nord with high frost and magic resistance, which is common, can just shrug off his attacks. If Harkon had stuck to a sword and shield, he might have stood a better chance. There is an obscure lore tidbit found in the developer commentary and art books for Dawnguard that suggests the Vampire Lord design was intended to look monstrous and uncomfortable. It wasn't meant to look cool in the traditional superhero sense, it was meant to look like a beast bursting out of a man. The lore implies that this form is a manifestation of the inner predator taking over. It is a loss of control, not a gain. By relying on it, Harkon is suppressing his intellect and letting the beast drive. This brings us to a fan theory regarding the devolution of blood. Some lore enthusiasts argue that the Vampire Lord form isn't an evolution, but a regression. It makes the vampire resemble a gargoyle or a Daedric titan, creatures of servitude. Molag Bal didn't give them a form of kings. He gave them the form of his guard dogs. Harkon thinks he looks like a god. The rest of the universe sees a gargoyle that learned to hover. Harkon's reliance on this form also limits his versatility. In human form, a vampire can use potions, scrolls, staves, and varied weaponry. In Lord form, you're locked into a specific moveset. You can't drink a healing potion. You can't swap to a bow. You're a one-trick pony. During the final boss fight, Harkon spends most of his time hovering around, shooting red balls of light. He becomes predictable. He telegraphs his moves. He is playing an arcade shooter while the Dragonborn is playing a tactical RPG. Visually, the form creates a disconnect. Harkon is an aristocrat. He wears fine clothes. He speaks eloquently. He holds a court. Then he turns into this ugly, naked bat thing. It shatters the illusion of nobility. It reveals the ugly truth underneath the velvet. It's hard to take a villain's monologue seriously when he looks like a wrinkled ballsack with wings. Compare this to the werewolf transformation. Werewolves know they are beasts. They don't pretend to be kings. They maul, they feed, they run. It's honest. The Vampire Lord is a contradiction, a beast trying to act like a wizard. It tries to cast spells with giant clawed hands. It looks awkward. And let's not forget the sun weakness. The Vampire Lord form does not negate the sun. In fact, without the sun being blotted out, the form is even more vulnerable during the day because it can't regenerate stamina or magicka. Harkon is building his entire combat doctrine around a form that has a specific off switch hanging in the sky. If he transforms during the day and runs out of magicka, he is just a floating piñata. In the final confrontation, Harkon transforms immediately. He thinks this is his serious mode, but in doing so, he makes himself a larger target for Auriel's bow. The hitbox is massive. You almost can't miss him. If he had stayed small, agile, and used cover, he would have been much harder to kill. He effectively makes himself the broadside of a barn for the specific weapon designed to destroy him. The Vampire Lord form flaw is the physical manifestation of Harkon's hubris. He believes that more is always better. More size, more claws, more wings. He doesn't understand that true power often lies in precision and adaptability. He trades his versatility for a scary costume, assuming that fear alone will win the fight. But the Dragonborn has fought dragons. A big bat doesn't scare them. It just makes for an easier target. And speaking of targets, while Harkon is admiring his wings in the mirror, an actual army is gathering outside. A group of people he dismissed as a rabble. A group led by a man too stubborn to die. Harkon's complete failure to address the Dawnguard threat until they are literally breaching his walls is our next point of failure. This is ignoring the Dawnguard threat, or how to let your nemesis level up in peace. While Harkon is busy hovering around his castle, getting stuck in doorways and mismanaging his livestock, a storm is brewing in the rift. An old fort long abandoned is being swept out. Torches are being lit. Crossbows are being calibrated. The Dawnguard is reforming. Now, you would think that an ancient vampire clan, upon hearing that an order of dedicated vampire hunters is setting up shop in the same province, would take immediate action. You would think they would send a strike team to burn the fort down while it's still empty. You would think they would assassinate the leader, Isran, before he can recruit anyone. But no, Harkon does nothing. This is ignoring the Dawnguard threat, and it is a blunder of epic proportions. Harkon treats the Dawnguard not as a threat, but as a minor annoyance, like a mosquito buzzing in the distance. He calls them a rabble and pretenders. He dismisses Isran as a fanatic with no resources. This might have been true on day one, but Isran is a grinder. He works hard. He recruits the Dragonborn. He recruits Serene Gerard, a master of Dwemer technology. He recruits Gunmar, a master beast trainer. He recruits Florentius Banius, a priest of Arkay with a direct line to his god. Week by week, the Dawnguard transforms from two guys in a crumbling ruin into a highly disciplined, magically bolstered paramilitary organisation. And Harkon lets it happen. He has spies, he has thralls, he knows they are there. But he never orders a preemptive strike. Why? Because he is fixated on the prophecy. He has tunnel vision. The sun is the enemy, he thinks. These mortals are irrelevant. This is the villain ball trope in full effect. Harkon holds the idiot ball because the plot requires the good guys to have time to prepare. But in universe, it is explained by his arrogance. He believes that once the sun is dark, the Dawnguard won't matter. He thinks he's racing against a cosmic clock, not a military one. But here is the reality check. The Dawnguard are the ones who find the Moth priest. The Dawnguard are the ones who track down the bow. The Dawnguard are the ones who essentially facilitate the entire race for the artifacts. By ignoring them, Harkon allows them to become the primary competitors for the very items he needs. If Harkon had crushed the Dawnguard early, he would have had a monopoly on the search for Serana and the bow. Instead, he allowed a competitor to enter the market. Core in-game fact. The Dawnguard gets access to exploding crossbow bolts, fire, ice, shock, and sun-hallowed weaponry. These are hard counters to vampires. Serene Gerard reverse engineers Dwemer tech to create weapons that bypass vampire defenses. By leaving them alone, Harkon allows an R&D department to develop weapons specifically designed to kill him. It's like a bacteria watching scientists invent penicillin and saying, they look harmless. There is an obscure lore tidbit regarding the original Dawnguard. They were dissolved because they became vampires themselves, to better hunt them, supposedly, and were hunted down by the Jarl of Riften. Harkon likely remembers this history. He probably thinks, they will destroy themselves like the last ones did. He is relying on history to repeat itself without accounting for the new variable. Isran is paranoid specifically because of that history. He tests everyone. He creates sunlight barriers. He ensures corruption doesn't take root. Harkon bet on the Dawnguard's incompetence, but Isran fixed the bugs. Harkon also fails to understand the power of the crossbow. It's a weapon that requires little training, but delivers high armor penetration. It democratizes vampire killing. You don't need to be a skilled mage or a master swordsman, you just point and click. This allows the Dawnguard to turn farmers into vampire hunters in a week. Harkon's elite forces are suddenly facing a wall of projectiles that can punch through their chests. Fan theories often discuss the vampire spy angle. Why didn't Harkon infiltrate the Dawnguard? He could have sent a thrall, or a vampire using vampire seduction or illusion magic, to join their ranks and sabotage them from within. The game gives us a quest to do this, if you side with Volkihar, but it's a side mission to kill a specific leader, not a deep infiltration. A true mastermind would have poisoned their water supply or burned their blueprints. By the time Harkon realizes the Dawnguard is a threat, they are marching across the bridge to his castle. They have armored trolls, they have sun spells, they have the Dragonborn. It is too late. The siege of Castle Volkihar is the direct result of Harkon's passivity. He sits on his throne, waiting for the enemy to come to him. This is a defensive mindset in a war he started. He instigated the conflict by attacking cities, as we discussed in Section 2, but when the retaliation formed, he ignored it. It's schizophrenic strategy, aggressive enough to make enemies, passive enough to let them get strong. Harkon's dismissal of Isran is personal too. Isran is everything Harkon is not. Human, gritty, pragmatic, and unmagical. Harkon looks down on him, but Isran is the one who organises the coalition that brings down an ancient empire. It's the classic wizard versus warrior hubris. The wizard thinks he is God. The warrior brings a shotgun. The final insult is that the Dawnguard uses Harkon's own family drama against him. They work with Serana. They use the information she provides to plan the assault. Harkon's ignore-it strategy extends to his daughter's defection. He knows she is with them, but he doesn't try to capture her or kill her until the final confrontation. He lets the enemy possess the key to his destruction. In the end, the Dawnguard threat wasn't a distraction from the prophecy. It was the mechanism of its failure. Harkon's inability to multitask, to handle the admin of being a villain while pursuing the vision, cost him everything. He wanted to fight the sun, but he got beaten by a guy named Durak with a crossbow. But of course, the Dawnguard couldn't have succeeded without the insider, the mole, the daughter, the family drama that Harkon pretended didn't exist until it stabbed him in the heart. Let's look at the domestic dispute that ended the world, or rather saved it. This is family drama over global domination. They say you shouldn't mix business with family. When your business is eternal darkness and global enslavement, this advice counts double. Yet, Lord Harkon didn't just mix them. He built his entire corporate structure on the shaky foundation of a shattered marriage and a traumatized daughter. This is family drama over global domination, and it is the emotional weakness that crumbles the Vulkihar Empire. Harkon views his family not as people, but as assets. Valerica is the producer of the daughter. Serana is the key to the prophecy. He has stripped away all familial bonds in favour of transactional value. He assumes that because he is the patriarch, they will obey. He assumes that his ambition is so grand it overrides their personal feelings. This is a catastrophic misreading of human and vampire nature. Resentment is a powerful motivator. Spite is even stronger. Valerica didn't steal the Elder Scroll because she cared about the sun. She stole it to hurt Harkon. She explicitly tells the Dragonborn that her main goal was to deny him his prize. I could not let him have what he wanted, she says. The fate of the world was secondary to the fate of her divorce settlement. She was willing to spend eternity in the Soul Cairn just to make sure Harkon didn't get his way. That is a level of pettiness that transcends mortality. Harkon, on his end, spent thousands of years stewing in his hatred for her. When you speak to him about Valerica, he calls her that treacherous bitch. He's obsessed with her betrayal. It clouds his judgment. He isn't thinking clearly about the scroll. He's thinking about beating her. The prophecy becomes a proxy war for their failed relationship. And then there is Serana, the daughter caught in the middle. Harkon treats her strictly as a blood bag. He needs her blood to taint the arrows. He doesn't ask how she's been. He doesn't ask about her time in the crypt. He says, "You have my father's blood and you are necessary." He fails to realize that Serana has agency. He assumes she will just go along with being sacrificed, or at least bled significantly. He underestimates her desire for independence. Serana has spent her entire existence being controlled by her parents, first by Molag Bal's ritual, then by Valerica's locking her away, and now by Harkon's plan. Her entire character arc is about breaking free from this control. By pushing her, by treating her like an object, Harkon forces her to defect. He drives her right into the arms of the Dawnguard. If he had shown her even an ounce of fake affection, if he had played the loving father role for just a week, he might have manipulated her into giving him the blood willingly. "Serana, my dear, do this for our family, for our future," she might have hesitated. But he's too arrogant for manipulation. He demands, and Serana rebels. This rebellion is fatal. Serana knows the castle, she knows the secrets, she has the Elder Scroll, and she has the blood. By alienating her, Harkon hands the opposition the literal keys to the kingdom. He creates his own Brutus. Core in-game fact: in the final confrontation, Serana actively fights alongside you against her father. She has unique dialogue where she confronts him, telling him that he destroyed their family for nothing. Harkon's response is to call her a traitor and try to kill her. There is no moment of redemption, no hesitation. He is willing to murder his only child because she won't let him turn off the lights. This complete lack of empathy makes him predictable. Serana knows exactly how he will react. She warns you. He won't listen, she says. He's too far gone. She provides the intel on his psychology that allows you to defeat him. There's an obscure lore tidbit, or rather, a lack of one, regarding Harkon's life before he was a vampire. We know he was a king, a tyrant perhaps, but we know nothing of his family life before the Pact. It implies that the family was always secondary to the power. The rot was there from the beginning. The pact with Molag Bal just accelerated it. Bal creates mockery of life. Harkon created a mockery of a family. The irony is that if the family had been united, they would have been unstoppable. Imagine Valerica's alchemy and knowledge of the soul cairn, combined with Harkon's combat power and Serana's unique abilities, and the Dragonborn as an ally. They could have ruled Tamriel without blocking the sun. They could have been a dynasty, but their dysfunction cancelled out their power. Valerica nullified Harkon. Harkon nullified Serana. They spent their energy fighting each other instead of the world. It's a zero-sum game played within the walls of a single castle. Harkon's ultimate failure is that he chose an abstract goal, the prophecy, over a concrete reality, his family legacy. He wanted to be remembered as the vampire who darkened the sun, but he is remembered as the vampire whose wife left him and whose daughter helped kill him. He sacrificed his legacy to chase a shadow, and this domestic tragedy leads us to the final scene, the family reunion in the cathedral. The father, the daughter, and the stranger with the dragon soul. The moment where Harkon could have surrendered, could have negotiated, or could have at least fought smartly. But he didn't. He chose to monologue. He chose to float. And he chose to ignore the fact that the person standing in front of him was holding the one weapon in the universe designed to kill him. Welcome to the final showdown blunder. Here we are, the end of the line, the Grand Cathedral of Castle Volkihar, the red-stained glass, the blood fountains, the shrines to Molag Bal. The stage is set for the final confrontation between the Lord of the Clan, his rebellious daughter, and the last Dragonborn. This should be a battle of wits and strength, a clash of titans. Instead, it is a demonstration of why monologuing is a fatal condition for villains. We call this the final showdown blunder. When you enter the sanctum, Harkon doesn't attack immediately. He talks. He stands there on the balcony and engages in a long, drawn-out conversation about betrayal, power, and destiny. He asks for the bow. He threatens Serana. He tries to justify his madness. "You have the bow," he says. "Give it to me and I will let you live." Let's pause. He's asking the person who just stormed his castle, killed his gargoyles, slaughtered his court, and retrieved the one weapon capable of killing him, to just hand it over. It is a negotiation tactic so detached from reality it borders on comedy. He has zero leverage. His castle is breached. His family has turned on him. He is alone. Yet he acts as if he holds all the cards. Why not ambush you? Why not attack the moment the door opens? Why not use an invisibility potion and backstab you? No, he has to have his dramatic moment. He has to explain why he is going to kill you before he actually tries. This gives you time to position yourself, time to drink potions, time to equip the very weapon he is afraid of. And speaking of that weapon, Auriel's bow. It is the artifact of the sun god. It shoots light. It is holy damage incarnate, and Harkon stands there and lets you hold it. When the fight actually starts, Harkon makes his biggest tactical error. He transforms immediately into the Vampire Lord. As we discussed in section 12, this makes him a large floating target, but it gets worse. Throughout the fight, Harkon uses a defensive shield powered by the gargoyles and blood fountains in the room. He retreats to his altar to regenerate. This seems smart, right? Use the environment. But there is a flaw. The shield is impenetrable except to one thing. Auriel's bow. Harkon built a panic room that can only be unlocked by the key he let you bring into the room. Core in-game fact. When Harkon is regenerating in his blood barrier, the only way to break the shield is to shoot it with sun-hallowed arrows from Auriel's bow. If you didn't have the bow, he would be invincible. But he knows you have the bow. He demanded it 5 minutes ago. So why does he rely on a defense mechanism that is specifically hard-countered by the weapon in your hand? It's like locking your door but handing the burglar the key. He retreats to his bubble thinking he is safe, but he is just standing still, waiting for you to shoot him. He sets himself up for the finishing move. He effectively directs the fight to highlight his own weakness. He also ignores Serana. During the fight, he focuses almost exclusively on the Dragonborn. Serana is blasting him with ice spikes and drain life spells, chipping away at his health, and he barely acknowledges her. He considers her beneath notice. This allows her to disrupt his casting, stagger him, and keep the pressure on. He is fighting a 2v1 battle but acting like it's a duel. And let's look at his offensive output. He spams the same few spells: Drain Life, Bat Swarm, Summon Gargoyle. He doesn't use the environment to his advantage. He doesn't collapse the ceiling. He doesn't flood the room with blood. He floats in the centre, predictable and exposed. When his health gets low, he tries to do his final form move. He turns into a swarm of bats and mist, but again, he reforms in the same spots. He doesn't try to escape. He doesn't try to flee the castle to fight another day. He fights to the death in a room with no exit strategy. A smarter villain, realising the castle was lost and the bow was in enemy hands, would have fled. He could have mist-formed out a window, gone into hiding and rebuilt. He has eternity, right? Why die on this hill? Because his ego won't let him retreat. He would rather die a lord than live as a fugitive. His pride is the final nail in his coffin. When the final blow lands, usually an arrow to the heart or a sword through the chest, Harkon explodes into a pile of red ash. He screams, "No!" in the classic villain fashion. His remains are just dust. The mighty lord of the Volkihar, the terror of the north, reduced to a pile of dirt on his own carpet. The tragedy of the final showdown is that it was entirely avoidable. He could have killed you in the hallway. He could have killed you when you first brought Serana home. He could have killed you when you were looking for the Moth priest. He had dozens of chances to end the threat, but he let you live, let you grow, and let you arm yourself. He curated his own death. He nurtured his executioner. As the dust settles and Serana stands over the pile of ash that used to be her father, the silence in the cathedral is heavy. The tyranny is over. The sun will rise tomorrow. The vampires of Clan Volkihar are leaderless, broken, and defeated. And it wasn't because the Dawnguard was an unstoppable force. It wasn't because the Dragonborn was a god. It was because Clan Volkihar, led by Lord Harkon, made every single wrong decision possible. They fought nature, they fought logic, they fought their family, and they fought the basic principles of survival. They were the dumbest villains in Skyrim not because they were weak, but because they were stupid. They had everything: power, immortality, a fortress, and they threw it all away for a bad idea and a worse attitude. So, the red ash settles on the cold stone floor, and the echoes of the battle finally fade into the vast silence of the cathedral. The ancient grudge is resolved, not with a bang, but with the quiet return of the natural order. The sun will rise over the sea of ghosts, painting the icy waves in gold and orange, indifferent to the schemes of monsters who tried to cage it. The castle, once a hive of ambition and malice, is now just another silent ruin standing against the wind, its halls empty, its secrets buried under the weight of its own failures. And as we leave the frozen north behind, let the chill of that story dissipate. You are far away from the biting cold of Harfingar. You are safe, warm, and sheltered. The shadows in your room are not gargoyles waiting to spring. They are just the gentle embrace of the night, wrapping around you to offer rest. There are no prophecies here to solve, no ancient curses to break, only the steady rhythm of your own breathing and the soft, inviting comfort of your bed. Let your mind drift away from the strategies and the blunders, away from the sharp teeth and the glowing eyes. Let the tension in your shoulders melt like snow in the spring sun. The story is told, the villains are vanquished, and the world is safe for another night. Close your eyes now. Let the darkness be a comfort, not a threat. Let the quiet wash over you, deep and heavy and peaceful. You have adventured enough for one day. It is time to rest. It is time to let go. Sweet dreams.